I've tasked myself with watching a movie every day in 2025, and I thought it might be fun once a week to take a look back at a classic film on a big anniversary that I had never seen before. Well, this one is truly one of the biggest gaps in my film watching history. I had never seen Pretty Woman. This is the 35th anniversary, so let's take a deep dive. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my movie review for Pretty Woman. This is the 35th anniversary of this classic rom-com, one that has certainly been on my watch list for a long time. Many people over the years, saying, I can't believe you've never seen this. This seems right up your alley. And so finally, I'm getting down to watching this. When I realized that this was one of the anniversary movies I could watch, I thought, well, this will be great. I can finally check this one off my list. And this is actually already the second Richard Gere movie I've done for this project because it's the 45th anniversary of American Gigolo. I had never seen that, so there's a video up for that as well, and I'll put the link to that at the end of this video. And actually, last year, I didn't do a video for it or anything, but last year I watched for the first time An Officer and a Gentleman when Louis Gossett Jr. died. So that was another Richard Gere movie I had never seen before. So definitely diving in to the Richard Gere of it all. Before we dive into this specific film, Pretty Woman, and take a look back at some of the creation of the movie and some casting what-ifs and all of that, and then, of course, my review, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're a subscriber already for Dan Reviews It, then you know I usually do the newer movies and TV shows, at least within the past year or two. But like I said, in trying to watch a movie every day this year, they can't all be brand new movies, so I thought let's check some of these classics off my list. But if you are not a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button and comment below too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this movie. I know there's a lot of Pretty Woman fans out there, and so hopefully you are one of them. All right, so let's start with the basics. This was released on March 23rd of 1990, so we are in, like I said, the 35th anniversary year for this film. And obviously, I'm a little behind in doing my videos for these weekly ones, but still, this came out in March, and this had a very small budget. I guess for the time, it was fairly sizable for a romantic comedy, $14 million, but worldwide, this thing made $463 million, and almost 200 of that was in the U.S. alone, $178 million. It debuted at number 1 with $11 million, and it fell to number 2 in week 2, but actually made more money because word of mouth was getting around. So it came back to number 1 in its 6th week, stayed there another 3 weeks. So this had a nice, healthy chunk of time at number 1, or at least number 2. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the movie that held the top spot for those other 4 weeks in between. But this was in the top 10 for 16 weeks in the U.S. And of course, look, this is when you had movies in theaters for 6 months, 9 months. The video release didn't come out, even for a while after that. So your only chance to see it for a long time was at the theater. Of course, that has changed, over the years between, DVDs sort of closing that window a little bit with theaters. And then now, of course, with streaming, it goes right to on demand within about 3 weeks, 4 weeks of being in the theaters. But back in the day, if you remember, in 1990, a movie like this that had legs could really last a long time at the box office. This became the 3rd highest grossing movie from 1990 in the U.S. after Home Alone and Ghost, and 4th highest worldwide, and it included Home Alone and Ghost, but threw Dances with Wolves in there for the worldwide audience. And for a long time, it was the highest grossing R-rated movie by Walt Disney Pictures. This was not, a Disney movie per se. Julia Roberts, is not a Disney princess in that regard, but this was by Buena Vista, which distributed Disney movies at the time, and or I guess Disney distributed their movies, I should say. And so technically this is a Disney property, and it was the highest grossing R-rated movie for decades until just last year, believe it or not. Deadpool and Wolverine broke that record. Now, of course, the first 2 Deadpool movies were not under the Disney banner, so I think they probably grossed higher than Pretty Woman as well. But still, that's a pretty impressive feat to have, that highest grossing highest grossing tally for years and years and years. It is still the number 1 rom-com of all time based on ticket sales alone. Of course, when they figure out, adjusted for inflation and whatever. So it had a little over 42 million tickets sold. I believe that number is worldwide. My Big Fat Greek Wedding is close with 41.5 million. But this one beat it out. Critical response at the time was mixed. Roger Ebert gave it a thumbs up. Siskel gave it a thumbs down. Entertainment Weekly famously gave it a D. It was in actually one of their first issues. It might have been their first issue because that debuted as a magazine in early 1990. I was a subscriber from the start. K.D. Lang was on the cover of the first one. This might have been in that first issue, or if not, like the second or third. And they famously hated it. They went back years later and said, well, we might have gotten that one wrong. But at the time they really hated it. And the awards were coming fast at this movie. Julia Roberts got her second Oscar nomination and second Golden Globe win in a row for this film, with Steel Magnolias being the other for both. Richard Gere and Hector Elizondo were both also nominated at the Golden Globes. The MTV Movie Awards, now they did not exist until 92, in which Julia Roberts was nominated for Dying Young. But in 1990, she won the Nickelodeon's Kid Choice Award for Pretty Woman. Now, just as an aside, I don't know why kids were watching Pretty Woman, this R-rated movie about the hooker, but okay, times maybe have changed a little bit with that. But this also, more recently, was a hit with the American Film Institute, AFI, 100 Years, 100 Passions list. This ranked at number 21. And the legacy continues for this movie. There was a Broadway musical that ran for over 400 performances between 2018 and 2019, and a U.S. and world touring stage show. And Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance, his longtime collaborator, did the songs for that. I haven't heard any of them, but love a good Bryan Adams tune. So interesting that they did the soundtrack for that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the filming. The casting what-ifs are always fun. Talking about people that maybe were offered the part and turned it down, people that auditioned and didn't get offered the part, etc. And this movie, this script must have been, one of the hottest properties all over Hollywood, because almost everybody auditioned for either the Richard Gere part or the Julia Roberts part. So we start with the men. Gary Marshall, who directed the film, wanted Christopher Reeve, Daniel Day-Lewis, Kevin Kline, and Denzel for the Edward role, and offered the role to Albert Brooks, Sylvester Stallone, Christopher Lambert, Al Pacino, and Burt Reynolds. They all turned it down. Pacino went as far as to even do a casting reading with Julia Roberts before deciding to direct the part. Sam Neill and Charles Grodin also tested for the part along with Roberts, and John Travolta really wanted the role, but they ended up turning him down. He was not offered the part. He was doing more, I guess, silly movies at the time. Look Who's Talking had come out. But in any event, it's interesting because we brought Travolta up in the American Gigolo video that I did. He was initially offered that role and even did like a suit fitting and everything, but ended up turning the role down, and it went to Richard Gere. So now, he really wanted this part, and it goes to Richard Gere. But some of these are interesting. I mean, look, some of these people certainly could have pulled it off. Daniel Day-Lewis seems like such a serious actor. Like, even then, My Left Foot, I think, had come out by then. So, he was in prep for Last of the Mohicans. I feel like that's a little intense. Kevin Kline, I think, would have done great. I could definitely see that. Al Pacino, maybe a little less so. Burt Reynolds, I think, would have been interesting. Of course, he was still a pretty hot property back then. So very interesting. And Gere actually didn't want the part originally, but he was phoning the studio to actually turn it down. Julia Roberts passed him a Post-it note that said, "Please say yes." And he said, okay, well, I guess we'll give it a shot if Julia wants it. But look, she was not the first choice for Vivian either, and was very much not wanted by Disney at all. Disney's picks, by the way, Meg Ryan, which makes sense, hot off of When Harry Met Sally. Another one I just recently watched. I think last year I watched that for the first time, or 2 years ago. Great movie. But Meg Ryan they wanted for the female part, and Sean Connery for the men's part. And we've already done a Sean Connery movie on the classic anniversary feature here. Another 1990 film, The Hunt for Red October. So I reviewed that with Sean Connery. But yeah, they wanted those two. Don't see that really working out. Meg Ryan certainly could have done it, I think. But Sean Connery, I don't know. I don't see that happening. But some other women. So Gary Marshall wanted Karen Allen for the role. She declined, and so auditions at that point went to many well-known actresses at the time, like Molly Ringwald. I think she could have done a good job with it, but she felt there was something a little icky about the story. Winona Ryder, Drew Barrymore, and Jennifer Connelly all auditioned, but were turned down because Marshall thought they were all too young. You had Patricia Arquette, Brooke Shields, Uma Thurman, Lauren Holly, Kristen Davis, all auditioning for this role. None of them got the call, though. But Meg Ryan actually turned it down after she was offered the role. And Diane Lane came very close to being offered it as well. She went on to, of course, do several movies with Richard Gere, but she had some scheduling conflicts. And at the time, the script was a much darker tone, a much grittier film than the one that we have come to know. But Michelle Pfeiffer turned the role down, didn't like the script's tone. I think this is all when it was a little bit heavier. Daryl Hannah was considered, but thought the role was degrading to women, so she turned it down. Valeria Golino, who you might remember, she was in Rain Man, she was in Hot Shots, so she was a very, very sexy actress at the time, but they decided not to go with her because of her thick Italian accent. They didn't think it worked with the character, but it was actually down to her and Julia Roberts. They were the final two that they were going towards. Sarah Jessica Parker offered the role but disliked the part. Leah Thompson auditioned for the role successfully, but she thought it was more of a heavy drama. I don't know if the script had been fixed by then to the more lighter tone, but she played it very heavy in the audition, so they didn't go with her. So it went to Julia Roberts, who at the time, by the way, hadn't done much. I mean, Mystic Pizza had come out, Satisfaction had come out with Justine Bateman and Liam Neeson, but Steel Magnolias was filmed but hadn't been released yet when this was in the works. So, nobody knew what a superstar she was going to be just from those couple of movies. So, all right, a little other casting fun. Jason Alexander is in this movie. If you didn't know, he plays the Philip Stuckey role, the lawyer. But Wayne Knight, who plays Newman on Seinfeld, auditioned for that part. Jason Alexander got it. I didn't know this until today, but Wayne Knight auditioned for George Costanza on Seinfeld. Of course, he ended up being Newman, but I thought that was, kind of interesting kismet. And this would have come out right as Seinfeld was like starting to hit. So I'm not sure if Jason Alexander was cast first in this or first in Seinfeld. I'm not really sure. But it is interesting that Wayne Knight ended up auditioning for that role as well. And then you have Shelley Michelle, who was Julia Roberts' body on the poster and her body double in the film. And after hiring Shirley, the first thing Gary Marshall did was change the way she walked, because she walked more like a professional model, which she was, and Julia Roberts walked more like a cowgirl. So they had Stacey walk a little bit more, American, a little more Southern, perhaps, because the character of Roberts, of Vivian, I should say, is from Georgia in this movie, so it makes sense. And the two got along so well, Julia Roberts and her body double, that she offered her to be her kind of continuing body double in the new movie Flatliners that she would be filming, but Michelle declined to go to Japan and do some more modeling. All right, so the other thing I want to say in terms of the filming of the movie. So the famous scene, probably the most famous scene in the movie, where Richard Gere playfully snaps that jewelry case lid on her, and she laughs and everything, that was completely improvised. Her laugh was unscripted. In fact, the two biggest laugh moments for Vivian in the movie were not really filmed the way they were supposed to be. That scene was improvised, and the scene where she's watching TV, I think it's I Love Lucy, and she's laughing hysterically. Gary Marshall was tickling her foot off camera. Can't do that today. That's a 1990 thing for sure. He would be probably sued for sexual harassment today, but back then that's how he got her to laugh. And then finally, the car. The Spirit car that Edward drives is pretty iconic with this role. And Ferrari and Porsche were maybe going to, or they were approached at least about having their cars be in the film, and neither one wanted to do it. They didn't want to be associated with prostitutes. They were like, nah, we're good. So Lotus Cars stepped up and said, oh, we get this. We see what you're doing here. And they put an Esprit in the movie, and sales tripled within the year of this movie's release. So pretty interesting stuff there. So let's talk about the movie on the whole. If you are unaware of the plot, I don't know how you would be, but it's pretty famous. The hooker with the heart of gold, and Richard Gere plays this businessman that ends up, taking a liking to her, and he hires her for some services for the night, but then realizes, oh, you know what, I maybe want to enjoy your company a little bit longer. So they sort of talk money back and forth, and she ends up staying with him for a week, and then they end up sort of liking each other even more than that, and enter into sort of a relationship. And it's funny because this reminded me a little bit, while I was watching it, of Honora, which took home the Best Picture Oscar this year, just a few months ago. And she was a stripper, private dancer, whatever, not a hooker per se, but it all started with a week of time with her suitor as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that this plot, is fairly classic, and it tends to work. So the original screenplay was actually titled 300, because that's how much money that he gets her for the week, which the numbers didn't quite add up for me. I forget what they are. I didn't write them down. I should have, but I think it was like, 200 for the hour, but then for the whole night was like, I don't know, was it like $500? Like, it was something that didn't make any sense. I was like, well, even with a discount, you should, sell yourself for more than that. Like, come on. But this was written by J.F. Lawton, and this is just about the only successful script he's ever done. He was working on this. Like I said, it was originally called 300. But all of these other movies that he had a hand in, I either have not heard of or don't think nice things about. One of them was Under Siege with Steven Seagal, and he wrote Blank Man, which I think was Damon Wayans, right? All of these other movies, though, that he's written, I don't even know what they are. The Hunted, Chain Reaction, Pizza Man, he directed that one. So, yeah, I mean, this was, I don't want to say one and done. Obviously, Under Siege was a hit at the time for Steven Seagal, but, this sort of stands alone as his crowning achievement, certainly. But yeah, originally it was going to be a little bit of a darker tale about, prostitution and class warfare and all that, but eventually it was, I don't know if Disney, when Disney got involved, they were like, let's turn it into this. I don't know, but this is now the story that we know and love. And look, in terms of reviewing the film, it's impossible to deny the chemistry between these two leads. Like I mentioned, I've seen more recent Richard Gere movies, but I had never seen some of his classic early films like American Gigolo, like Officer and Gentleman. The guy is suave as hell. Now, there is, a fairly big age gap here in this movie. He's 40 and she's 22. At least the actors were. I don't know specifically what the characters were supposed to be. But in any event, I was thinking about it, and actually for the time, it's not really a huge age gap in movie life. You would routinely see guys in their 40s and 50s with, 20-somethings. So 40 and 22, really, especially for this time in cinema, doesn't seem that bad, honestly. And look, Julia Roberts certainly doesn't act like she's 22. She doesn't look like she's 22. And Vivian as a character doesn't seem to be 22 either. So I don't know if the character was also supposed to be that age. And look, Richard Gere, certainly one of the most charming men around, one of the most attractive of the day. And still a good looker today, 35 years on. So their chemistry is absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, I never fully embraced the whole, Julia Roberts is the sexiest woman around kind of thing. I've always enjoyed her work. I could name off all of the movies I've seen of hers that I've really enjoyed. There are a lot of them. But I never quite got the whole, like, okay, she's the hottest thing around. There are certainly other actresses that I thought, okay, well maybe, this one is more attractive in a classical way or whatever. But here's the thing, and I could see why this movie's what did it. Her smile and her laugh, man, I'm done. I mean, I'm gay, and I'd be like, yep, Julia Roberts, sexy, sexy, sexy. I can totally see why this movie particularly put her on the map as, the A-list sexy star. Let's put her in all the rom-coms. Let's do all of these roles where she's, really utilizing her good looks. And she didn't always just take the roles like that. I mean, when I think about, the Pelican Brief or something like that, she's done a lot of movies, certainly, that didn't involve her looks or romance of any kind, but obviously, this movie struck a chord with moviegoers and with critics. Like I said, the reaction was a bit mixed, certainly. But, somebody as profound as Roger Ebert, who didn't usually go for kind of, corny and silly things, he gave this rom-com a thumbs up, even when his partner Ebert did not. So I can absolutely see why this movie instantly made Julia Roberts a star. She's so funny in this, and I love the characters. Now, some of them, I will admit, are a little bit, cut and paste from every other film, very stock. And I didn't really mention all of the actors in this movie. I mentioned a few, but Ralph Bellamy plays Jim Morse, who is the owner of this company that Edward plans to take over. I mentioned Jason Alexander. I mentioned Hector Elizondo. Laura San Giacomo from Just Shoot Me is in here too as Vivian's wisecracking best friend. She does a good job. Alex Hyde White is the grandson of the Ralph Bellamy character, and he's being groomed to take over the role as well at this big shipbuilding company they have. But I love the characters in this movie, specifically Hector Elizondo. I love that he got nominated for a Golden Globe for this movie because he absolutely, deserves that. I love their chemistry together. And at first, people are a little standoffish. There's, of course, the famous scene, where she goes into the swanky shop, and I think that's on Rodeo Drive, right? And, they say, "This isn't for you, please leave," or whatever. And, of course, it's heartbreaking and all of this. But as, the movie progresses, you're like, yeah, you show up. Like, it is such a story where you root for these people. Now, I have to say, I don't necessarily always root for Richard Gere's character. I think he's a jerk. And I think that might be my biggest issue with the movie, or at least one of them, other than the fact that I think the Jason Alexander lawyer character is very, like I said, kind of stock and whatever, not really adding anything. But, Richard Gere, look, I understand that they had to sort of give him this character arc to make him redeemable at the end. But, the whole movie, every time he does something, rude or, crass to her, or undermines her as a woman, or undermines her as a person, you're just like, oh, you jerk. And I know that's what they were going for, and in that way they succeeded. But Julia Roberts is just so likable in this movie. Anytime anyone is rude to her, you just want to reach your hand through the screen and punch them. So in that way, it's effective, certainly. And you can't talk about this movie without talking about the soundtrack. I mean, what a great soundtrack. This is a soundtrack that I have had on my shelf for decades before even seeing the movie. Go West, King of Wishful Thinking, one of my all-time favorite songs. Roxette, It Must Have Been Love, great tune. Wild Women Do by Natalie Cole. And really, for the time, a lot of movies were doing like older collections of songs, like Dazed and Confused had old songs from the 70s, of course, because that was the time period. And, a lot of the hot soundtracks of the day, Dirty Dancing, I guess those movies took place in the past, and this takes place in the present. But other than Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman, the soundtrack is all new stuff, and man, are they great songs. One of the best soundtracks, certainly, I think, of the early 90s. So look, I've gone on long enough. I think that is safe to say, so I thank you if you're still with me here watching. We'll leave it at that, but easy to see why this became such a favorite among so many people. Like I said, I just recently watched Harry Met Sally for the first time. I don't think it's quite on the level as When Harry Met Sally, but it's damn close, I have to admit. I leave Pretty Woman with an A-. And this one you can check out. I think I watched this. I always forget to look this up before I start the video, but I think I watched it on Paramount Plus. But anyway, it is available somewhere on one of the streamers for you to check out right now. And that will do it. Check out some of my other classic movie videos, including American Gigolo, like I said, the other Richard Gere one that I've done. And expect more of these coming up here. Try to get them to you every week or two with these classic films. All right, thank you for watching Dave Reviews It. I'll see you next time.